Okay, welcome to my MOAC 7412 course. We are working on configuring our failover cluster. So first thing we have to do is make sure we have all four of our machines powered on. Our storage server, our server 1, server 2, and our domain controller. Here, the important one is going to be storage 1. So let's go ahead and first thing is let's do some review of our storage to make sure that it's set up correctly. So go ahead and log into our storage server. And first thing, let's look at the adapter settings. We want to make sure that we have two adapters, one on the student domain, and that's going to be 1.80. And the DNS is going to be our domain controller. And the second adapter we're going to be using for a storage network, but we're not going to get into that just yet. All right, so lastly, we want to double check what roles we have installed. And so let's go through our server select. We need to make sure that our iSCSI target is installed, and it is. So that's important because all the servers are going to be connecting to storage for their shared storage. So we have to make sure that iSCSI is appropriately installed. All right, so once we've done that, we can head over to server 1, and we need to initiate or configure the iSCSI initiator on server 1. So let's go to our admin tools, open up iSCSI. So we can do this one of two ways. We can type in the name of the server, which is storage 1, click Quick Connect. If that does not work, you can do the IP address. And sometimes it takes a few seconds, sometimes goes fairly quickly, so you just need to be patient. All right, and here we go. Here is our iSCSI connector. It shows login has succeeded, shows connected, and that's what we want. Perfect. So now go ahead and click OK. Let's open up our computer management to verify, because we want to go to disk management, and you will see all of our unallocated disks. Those are on our storage server. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make online disks 1 and 2. And once we're running them online, we're going to initialize both of them. MBR should be fine. And we're going to go ahead and do new simple volumes on both of them. We're going to choose the full amount of space. E drive is fine. All our default settings are fine. We'll do the same thing for disk 2. And now we have two disks that are stored on storage fully connected. So I do want to point out, let's go ahead and rename these guys. So the first one should be called shared disk. And the next one should be called quorum. QUORUMDS. Oh, helps if I'm typing in the right box. Quorum disk. Oh, helps if I spell it correctly. And so we should have two disks. And let's go ahead and hop over to server 2. We're going to log in. We're going to load up the iSCSI initiator on server 2. If you get a VMware message tool, ignore it. If you get the iSCSI message, yes, we want to run it. All right, go ahead and type in our storage 1. That's where our storage is at. Quick connect does kind of take a minute, so again, be patient. You'll see that it is connected. Now let's go to volumes and devices. We don't see anything. Let's go and auto configure. All of our virtual disks that we created are now there. So that is the bare basics for us. You'll notice we don't actually have any connecting drives yet. So let's go ahead and look at our disk manager. So we can look at disk management. And you will see that our disks are there. These are offline, and they're offline because we haven't been given the instruction to turn them on yet, but we will be using them here shortly. So now that we see that, let's go ahead and hop over back to server 1. We're going to go ahead and minimize this. You'll see that they're active here, but they're not active on the other server 2 yet. That's because with these types of disks, trying to share them between both machines get kind of cumbersome, but we're going to touch on that here in a little bit. Let's go ahead and exit out of our disk manager. Let's go ahead and add a new role. We want to add the failover clustering role. We want to add it to server 1. And that's where we need to find our appropriate role. But even if you look through here, it's not classified as a role, classified as a feature. So we need to go down to failover clustering, and we're going to add all the appropriate requirements. So that we have failover clustering enabled, and we're going to go ahead and install them. We're going to do the same thing on server 2. Add roles and features, select server 2, go down to features, failover clustering, all the prereqs, next, and install. That way we have our failover clustering installed on both of them. Shouldn't take very long, but you never know. Okay, it didn't take too long, and it's completed on both servers. So I'm going to exit up so I can see my desktop. One of the next things we need to do is we need to configure our second NIC. So our first NIC is going to belong to our student domain. Our second NIC is going to be a new network. So go down to IPv4. We're going to be using 192.168.5.1 for server 1. That's all we need to do. No gateway, no DNS. We're going to go over to server 2 and do the same thing. We're going to be using the second NIC for specific communications. 192.168.5 helps if numlock is on. 2, again, no gateway, no DNS, that's okay. So when our addresses are set up and configured, let's go back over to server 1. Let's double check to make sure it is. And it is showing our IPv6, or our IPv4 address that we manually set. That's what we want. Go and exit out of everything. Let's open up the system manager. We want to configure our failover cluster now. So if we go to tools, after being installed, we should have a failover cluster manager now. First thing we need to do is validate the configuration. We do that by clicking on Validate Configuration. It will go through a wizard. So, what servers do we want to add? I'm going to add server 1 and server 2. If they are not adding correctly, check the firewalls. That's been a very common mistake. If need be, turn off the firewalls or find the appropriate ports that need to be opened for the servers to communicate. So once we add both of them, let's go ahead and click on Next. We're going to run all tests. And it'll give you a list of things to include. The test will take a few minutes. So the testing finished, things validated. Most of them should show success. If you receive a few that are showing fail, like IP address or network communication, that's not terrible. The one that did fail, that's because we have no internet access, and that's okay. And some of them may show warnings. Again, that is okay. I'm going to go ahead and finish. And next thing we have to do is let's go ahead and create a cluster. Our wizard begins. We're going to go ahead and add both of our servers back again. So we could run another validation test. We already ran it, but we're going to go through it again one more time, because before all we did was validate it. Now we're actually going to go through it. So I know we already ran through it, but let's go through it one more time. And you'll notice the second time around, it is a lot faster. Okay, so our validation has finished. And you'll notice it's going to keep taking us in this nice loop. So we do not want to do the validation again. So we're going to name our cluster Cluster 1. We're going to uncheck the 5 network. And we're going to program, our lab wants us to put 52 in here. So we're ignoring the 5 network. We're going to make our new cluster address 52. We will hit next, and then we will verify our information and click on next. This should configure our cluster. So this may take a few minutes, and you may start getting a message saying this is longer than expected. You just kind of have to be patient. Okay, so I did find out that in order for the cluster groups to come online, you do have to have internet access. So I had to tweak this a little bit by adding a default gateway to each of my machines so it could get online. Otherwise, this would not complete. It just errored out every time. So again, double check to make sure you have a default gateway and that each of your machines can get on the internet before trying to finish the cluster creation. And go ahead and click on finish, and our cluster is now there. So let's look at the nodes that we have. You'll notice server 1 and 2. Let's hop over to server 2. If we refresh this, it should sync the settings over to our, okay, maybe not. We may have to connect it to a cluster. It should eventually populate over to server 2, but for now, server 1's good. I'm going to go ahead and maximize my screen because we're going to be doing a lot more work just in server 1, so that way we can just focus on server 1. Let's go ahead and look at our nodes. You'll see that we have server 1, and we should be able to see what we can do with it. Let's go ahead and expand out storage so we can see our disks and our pool. You'll see our disks are the two disks that we have that we set up are 8 gig and 2 gig. Again, that's shared storage on our storage server. So now that we've done that, we can see everything. Let's go ahead and let's right click on our cluster. And let's see what options that we get. So I want to go to more option, and I want to configure cluster quorum settings. I want to do advanced quorum configuration. I want to make sure that all nodes are there. You can select which ones that you'd like, but in our example we're using both. We will go next. We want to configure a witness. Now we're going to use the smaller of the two disks. So the 2 gig disk. Next. And here is a overview of our settings. That's what we want. And again, double check and finish. And now we've configured our cluster quorum and we've configured a witness disk. Okay, so that is it for that portion. Next we're going to be configuring a cluster storage space. Let's go ahead and back out of here. Let's go back to our server manager. We want to add a new feature. So select our appropriate server, server 1. We want a feature, and we're going to be looking for underneath file and storage services. Sorry, it is a server role. File and storage services. We want to be checking our file server. Look through the options and make sure that's the only one that we want. But right now, we are good with just file server. We have all the other options. And install. I'm going to hop over to server 2. I'm going to do the same thing. Server 2, server role. I want to enable file server. And install. And just be patient. Alright, our file server is installed on both servers. Let's go on to server 1. Let's reopen our Failover Cluster Manager. So it should connect back to our cluster 1. Let's go and expand it out. We're going to be setting up a new pool. So let's go ahead and right click somewhere. You notice you can't right click. So we're actually going to have to use our action menu, top left. We want a new storage pool. It is kind of slow, so just kind of be patient. Read through our normal before you begin option. And then let's provide it a name. We want to call it storage pool. We want managed and available to cluster 1. You're going to notice that we have the option for our 3, 5 gig drives, even though those are all really attached to our storage server. Because of iSCSI, they're showing local storage on our server 1. So we're going to go ahead and select all of them. So that will give us a capacity of 15 gigs. Let's go ahead and create. Go and close. And now we have a new pool. So to configure more storage on our pool, you can actually select our pool, right click, and let's go ahead and add or create a new virtual disk. And you'll notice here is our storage pool. That is from the pool of drives that we just selected. We're going to provide it a name. We're going to call this storage disk. That option is grayed out so we can't do it. Go through the options so we know how we're going to do our storage pool. In our example, we're just going to be using simple. So data is striped across the physical disks, maximizing our capacity and increasing throughput. So essentially some type of striping or RAID 0. And then we have to specify storage size. We have 12 gigs free. We're going to go ahead and use 12 gigs. These are our options. When it looks good, go ahead and click on Create. And we are done. Now we have our new volume options. Run through this wizard to set up a new volume. You will see that we have our cluster 1, and that has 12 gigs free. And we have our 2 other local storage. So under cluster 1, select the appropriate disk. We can set volume size, which 12 gigs is what we want. Let's assign it letter G. We can now format it how we want. And there are settings. Click on Create. And now we should have a G drive as 12 gigs. And that is G drive should be able to be accessed from both machines, or should fail over to the backup machine just in case. Alright, last thing we need to do is we need to configure or implement our cluster aware updates. So we're going to close out of all of this. And we actually want to move over to our storage server. And from our storage server, if you're not logged in, go ahead and log in. Let's add a new role. We're going to choose our storage server. And from here, we want to add roles and features. But we are looking for a specific feature. We're going to be adding our remote server administration tool. Next to it. And we're not sure which one, so the instructions say just all of them and all prereqs. And then next. Once you have all of those, oh, I do apologize. I got ahead of myself. It actually doesn't want us to select all of them. It actually wants us to look at both. And it wants us to select the featured administrative tools. And from there, it wants us to expand our failover cluster tools. And from our failover cluster tools, we want to check failover cluster management tool, our failover cluster modules for Windows PowerShell, our failover cluster command interface, but it does not say to select the, oh, it did, now is the next step, is select all 4 of them, and let's go ahead and add those. You may get an IIS page we're just going to go through them and install. We did not set up IIS. It's one of the prereqs, but we're not doing anything with it for this lab. This takes a few minutes to install, so again, be patient. Okay, the tool finished installing. Let's go and open up our newly created tool, Cluster Aware Updating. And with this, we should be able to type in our cluster, cluster1, click connect, and it should let us access our cluster. If it doesn't, wait a minute. If it does fail, just give it a minute. It will eventually allow you to connect to them. Alright, so once it actually comes responsive again, let's go and configure cluster self-updating options. I have to love how most of this is all wizard driven. So what we're going to be doing is going through our normal options. We're going to add our cluster awareness updating feature to our cluster. We are not pre-staging an account. We can set a specific option when we actually want to do our self-updating. Normally, for our general purposes, we can leave them just with this. For our advanced options, we can play with this based off of certain criteria. And you'll notice it may lag, so again, you have to be patient. Oh, that did take a while for it actually to populate. We're leaving all of them default. We could set them, but for our example, we're not going to. We have additional options as well. Going to look through our options and make sure they're what we want. And when you're done, click apply. This will add our CAU, our cluster awareness update, to our cluster. And that is actually the end of our basic configuring failover clustering. Our next lab will be for managing failover clusters. I want to thank you. And it finally showed success. And again, thank you.